Welcome to NTD News Today. Here are today's top stories. Following the deadly winter storm, extreme cold is gripping much of the nation, affecting millions of people. And forecasters say another winter storm could hit parts of the East Coast this weekend. A federal appeals court lifts limits on ICE tactics in Minnesota, siding with the Trump administration. And Border Czar Tom Homan is heading to Minnesota and will meet with Minneapolis Mayor Jacob Frey. Lawmakers call on DHS Secretary Noem to testify as tensions mount over ICE operations. This comes as Republicans scramble to avert a government shutdown as Democrats protest funding ICE, with one Democrat breaking ranks. ICE agents will help provide security at the upcoming Winter Olympics in Italy. The mayor of Milan says agents aren't welcome. President Trump heads to Iowa today to spotlight the economy, affordability, and energy policy as supporters and protesters prepare in Des Moines.
This is NTD News Today, live from our global headquarters in New York City.
Today is Tuesday, January 27th. I'm Stephanie Cox. And now we'll look at the latest on ICE operations in Minnesota. A federal appeals court yesterday sided with the Trump administration, allowing ICE officers to detain protesters and use non-lethal munitions and crowd control tools. NTD's Daniel Monahan has more on the ruling. It reverses a lower court decision that barred officers from taking such actions without probable cause.
Judges said the Department of Homeland Security made a strong showing that its challenge is likely to succeed in court on the merits of the case. The three-judge panel noted video evidence showing the difficulty federal agents face. Many protesters get in officers' faces and block their vehicles, then rejoin the crowd, mixing with those who are merely observing or recording. Attorney General Pam Bondi applauded the ruling, writing, "A liberal judge in Minnesota tried to handcuff ICE agents who are enforcing the nation's immigration laws and responding to obstructive and violent interference from agitators. This DOJ will protect federal law enforcement agents from criminals in the streets and activist judges in the courtroom." Border Czar Tom Homan is heading to Minnesota. President Trump wrote on Truth Social that Homan is tough but fair and will report directly to him. Secretary of Homeland Security Noem called Homan's deployment good news for peace, safety, and accountability in Minneapolis. She said his experience will aid wide-scale fraud investigations and help remove violent criminal illegal immigrants from the streets. And President Trump said he had a very good phone call yesterday with Minnesota Governor Tim Walz, and that the two leaders are on a similar wavelength amid unrest in Minneapolis. Walz called the conversation productive, emphasizing the need for impartial investigations into the shootings in Minneapolis involving federal agents. He also reiterated his call to reduce the number of federal agents in the state. President Trump also said he had a very good phone conversation with Minneapolis Mayor Jacob Frey. The Democrat has been critical of the federal government's immigration enforcement surge in the city. Trump said lots of progress is being made and that White House Border Czar Tom Homan would meet with Frey today. Frey said he appreciated the conversation and that he expects that some federal agents will start leaving the city. The mayor said he would continue pushing for all federal agents to leave. Assistant Secretary of Homeland Security Tricia McLaughlin responded to speculation that Commander-at-Large of the U.S. Border Patrol Gregory Bavino was fired. McLaughlin denied any dismissal, saying Bavino is a key part of the president's team and a great American. Daniel Monahan, NTD News.
Thank you, Daniel. And a judge in Minnesota has summoned the acting chief of ICE to appear in court on Friday. He's threatening to hold the ICE chief in contempt. The chief judge of Minnesota's federal court said acting ICE Director Todd Lyons must explain why he should not be held in contempt. The judge said ICE has not complied with dozens of court orders in recent weeks, and the agency missed a deadline to provide a detainee with a bond hearing. In a filing yesterday, he added, quote, "The court's patience is at an end." ICE and the DHS have not yet commented on the judge's order. Federal immigration enforcement in Minnesota has led to a surging of number of emergency lawsuits by immigrants who say they were illegally detained. The administration launched Operation Metro Surge in December to target what it calls criminal illegal immigrants. First Lady Melania Trump called for unity amid the protests in Minnesota. She spoke about the ongoing federal immigration operation this morning on Fox News. Take a listen.
We need to unify. I'm calling for unity. I know my husband, the president, had a great call yesterday with the governor and the mayor, and they're working together to make it peaceful and without riots. I'm against the violence, so if we protest in peace.
Multiple reports were saying that Border Patrol Commander Gregory Bavino is expected to leave Minneapolis today. Following that news, protests erupted last night in the freezing cold outside a hotel where protesters believed Bavino was staying. Dozens of people gathered, making noise with whistles and other items. In a statement, Maple Grove police say the situation later escalated. They said some people engaged in unlawful behavior and objects were thrown at officers. Authorities said the protest was no longer peaceful and a dispersal order was issued. Police say several protesters were arrested who failed to comply with the order or committed crimes. And amid escalating protests against ICE, the DHS says it's investigating a U.S. citizen who attempted to buy a firearm to kill ICE agents. In a statement today, the DHS said a woman in Kenmore, New York, attempted to buy a firearm on 2 separate occasions. She stated she wanted to use the weapon to, quote, protect herself from ICE agents and also to kill ICE agents. The DHS did not identify the woman, but said she is a U.S. citizen. The agency condemned radical rhetoric against immigration enforcement personnel. The DHS said, quote, you will not stop or slow us down. ICE and our federal law enforcement partners will continue to enforce the law. And if you lay a hand on a law enforcement officer, you will be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law. And now information from a Fox News investigative report. It examines how a complex network of socialist and communist groups could be behind the escalating Minnesota protests. They're being called a nationwide protest operation. NTD's Arlene Richards has more details.
As President Trump sends border czar Tom Homan to Minnesota, a Fox News report reveals a complex network of far-left organizations that it says are behind agitators mobilized to interfere with ICE agents in Minnesota. The report released Sunday by Fox investigative reporter Azra Nomani details how a national network of socialist, communist, and Marxist-Leninist cells in the United States used encrypted signal messages to actively track ICE agents. Nomani states that based on her review of the messages in real time, anti-ICE rapid responders quickly mobilized on the scene where armed protester Alex Preddy was killed even before any shots were fired. FBI Director Kash Patel said on Monday that rioters in Minneapolis have been conducting organized attacks even before the Preddy incident. In an interview, he discussed what law enforcement found in a protester's vehicle earlier this month.
In that vehicle was not just firearms, which thankfully we recovered, but was information about law enforcement, federal agents, and their personal information. Individuals used that personal information on the ground to issue threats of life against not only FBI agents, but their wives and their children.
Nomani states in an X post that the network is well funded. She identifies one of the funders as Neville Roy Singham, an American-born billionaire living in China. Arlene Richards, NTD News.
And the FBI is investigating encrypted signal chat groups allegedly used by anti-ICE activists to track and obstruct federal immigration agents. FBI Director Kash Patel confirmed the investigation yesterday, saying the Bureau is examining information provided by the public about the group chats. Here's Patel appearing on the Benny Jensen Show.
We immediately opened up that investigation because that sort of signal chat being coordinated with individuals, not just locally in Minnesota, but maybe even around the country, if that leads to a break in the federal statute or a violation of some law, then we are going to arrest people. You cannot create a scenario that illegally entraps and puts law enforcement in harm's way. Now, we will balance the First and Second Amendment constantly, but we have to let the community know that we will not tolerate acts of violence and an escalation and a violation of the federal code. If they broke the law, you should be worried. It's that simple. If you didn't break the law, there's really nothing to worry about.
Patel says investigators are using standard tools, including subpoenas and grand juries, to determine whether any laws were broken or violence was encouraged. Patel emphasized the investigation is not about restricting free speech or peaceful protest, nor lawful gun ownership. He said it becomes a federal matter only if individuals incite violence, threaten law enforcement, or otherwise break the law. The announcement comes days after an independent journalist reported infiltrating a signal group in Minneapolis. Activists in the group allegedly tracked ICE and Border Patrol vehicles and shared real-time location updates. Patel said the FBI is leading the effort to determine whether criminal activity occurred. And as tensions mount over ICE operations in Minnesota, lawmakers are calling on DHS Secretary Kristi Noem to testify publicly. And one Democrat breaks ranks with his party as many refuse to fund ICE. NTD's Melania Trump reports.
Several Democrats on Capitol Hill are pressing to impeach the DHS secretary following the second fatal shooting in Minnesota.
We're always going to need border enforcement at the southern border, but we absolutely have to dismantle Trump and Kristi Noem's version of ICE.
Amid the pressure, Republicans have summoned Secretary Noem to testify before Congress. Noem has not shied away from critics, instead swiftly agreeing to appear as a public witness. She's repeatedly defended her leadership in the ICE operations.
I don't know of any peaceful protester that shows up with a gun and ammunition rather than a sign. This is a violent riot when you have someone showing up with weapons and are using them to assault law enforcement officers.
She's agreed to testify on March 3rd before the Senate Judiciary Committee. This comes as lawmakers return to Capitol Hill today. Democratic leadership is leading the party to oppose the funding for the DHS and ICE. It's part of several funding bills expected to be brought up later today. One Democrat yet again breaking ranks. Senator John Fetterman described himself as a pro-immigration Democrat as he revealed his stance in a statement writing, "I reject the calls to defund or abolish ICE." He added that he strongly disagrees with many strategies and practices ICE deployed in Minneapolis and believe that must change. Though he says he supports an idea to separate ICE funding from the broader funding package, but Republicans are unlikely to make that change. Senators must approve several funding bills by Friday to avert another partial government shutdown. Reporting from Washington, D.C., Melina Weisskopf, NTD News.
ICE agents will support security operations for U.S. delegations at the 2026 Winter Olympics. The president of the organizing committee for the Milano Cortina Games has responded.
I have heard that they, ICE agents, will be present for technical reasons only because there are high-ranking U.S. government officials here in Italy, but they have nothing to do with the security aspects of the Olympics. I know that this is normal, or almost normal, when presidents or vice presidents are present, or as in this case, the U.S. Secretary of State. That's all.
The Department of Homeland Security confirmed that ICE will be present at the Olympics. DHS said it was clear that the agents would only assist in providing security, adding that ICE does not conduct immigration enforcement in foreign countries. ICE's Homeland Security investigations will support the State's Department's Diplomatic Security Service. Both will work with their Italian counterparts. DHS added that Italian authorities will be in charge of all security operations. And coming up, U.S.-Cuba relations examined as the communist nation's leader defends his country's military preparedness exercises. We'll bring you analysis. Plus, the National Transportation Safety Board holds a public hearing nearly a year after an Army helicopter collided with a passenger jet near Washington, D.C. The board's chairwoman said the agency has made significant progress in its investigation. All right, extreme cold warnings remain in effect this morning for about 160 million people in the nation. The National Weather Service says temperatures will stay well below normal. That cold is expected to last through this week and into next week. Wind chills turned life-threatening last night in the upper Ohio Valley. They dropped to minus 20 degrees Fahrenheit. Meanwhile, another blast of Arctic air is on the way. The Weather Service said it's expected to move from the plains into the east and southeast Friday into Saturday. More record low temperatures are possible, likely reaching as far south as Florida. Air travel is still being affected also. More than 1,400 flights were canceled this morning. More than 8,000 flights were delayed. Here's more on the historic winter storm.
Around 2/3 of the country face another night of below freezing temperatures as a massive winter storm finally comes to an end. At least 30 people died across the country in states afflicted with severe cold. The death toll includes 2 people run over by snowplows in Massachusetts and Ohio. Fatal sledding accidents killed teenagers in Arkansas and Texas. In Kansas, police found a woman's body covered in snow after she was last seen leaving a bar. In New York City, officials said 8 people were found dead outdoors over the frigid weekend. According to PowerOutage.com, there were still more than 560,000 power outages in the nation Monday evening, most of them in the South. In Nashville on Sunday, Lisa Patterson, her husband Bill, and her 7-year-old dog Hershey were rescued from their home by a police officer after fallen trees blocked their driveway and cut power to their home. They tried to stick it out with their wood fireplace, but the temperatures were too cold.
We've had several ice storms up there, but none of them even knocked my power out. And I've been snowed in up there for like almost 3 weeks without being able to get up and down my driveway because of the snow. And I'm used to that. I prepare for that. But this was unprecedented.
In Mississippi, officials are warning that damage cleanup and power restoration could take a week or more after the state faced its worst ice storm in more than 30 years. Governor Tate Reeves said in a briefing Monday that he's deploying 500 National Guard soldiers by Wednesday to remove debris and control traffic.
We are trying to make sure that we can time this to get resources wherever they are needed as quickly as is humanly possible, but to do it in a safe way so that we don't put more Mississippians in danger.
In Little Rock, Arkansas, businesses are trying to get back on their feet after being paralyzed by the storm. A local foreman spent 2 hours Monday to open 2 parking spots and an entrance using heavy equipment.
Right now we're trying to get companies back open to where they can operate. Some of it's being a little tricky right now because of course the sun is shining on it and making it very slippery right now.
Economists and meteorologists are trying to get a handle on the disruption caused of winter weather disasters. Small businesses like Tacos El Gordo, a local food truck, are feeling the impact.
We usually get a lot of people from the bases and from the local businesses around, usually around lunchtime. But we've had to close not only for people's safety, but also because everybody who works in landscaping or outside aren't able to come and get their lunch or anything like that.
In the nation's capital Monday, National Guard members were seen shoveling a snowbound bus free. The system dumped about a foot of snow on the East Coast and left roads frozen slick with ice. New York City saw its snowiest day in years with 11 inches falling on Central Park. Mayor Zohran Mamdani said Monday the storm has passed, but danger remains, especially to the homeless living on the streets.
Outreach teams are only intensifying their efforts today to connect vulnerable New Yorkers to shelter. This is an all-hands-on-deck effort, and I continue to ask New Yorkers to call 311, which will route these calls to 911 as it is a code blue, whenever they see someone who may require assistance.
President Trump is speaking to reporters before departing to Iowa. Take a listen.
Do you believe that Alex Truddy's death was justified?
Well, you know, we're doing a big investigation. I want to see the investigation. I'm going to be watching over it. I want a very honorable and honest investigation. I have to see it myself.
Is Kristi Noem going to step down?
No.
The president of Venezuela said that she is not taking orders from you. What do you have to say about that?
Well, I don't know exactly what's going on there, but I haven't heard that at all. No, we have a very good relationship.
What about
I'd like to see interest rates go down. Everything else is going down. We have the energy and fuel going down. We have gasoline in many states now at $1.99. Groceries are going down. We inherited a mess with very, very high prices, very, very high prices. And I will tell you, we've made a lot of progress. So we have the groceries going down. We have the energy going down. We have gasoline going down at a record clip. And that's what I want to do. We're doing well. Well, I'm looking at that whole situation. I love everybody. I love all of our people. I love his family. And it's a very sad situation. Yeah, please. I have, yeah. I think she's doing a very good job. The border is totally secure. You know, you forget, we had a border that I inherited where millions of people were coming through. Now we have a border where no one is coming through. They come into our country only legally. So you have to remember those things. You know, people forget as soon as you accomplish something, it goes into history and nobody ever wants to talk about it. We had a border that caused all of this problem. Biden caused, and the Democrats caused this problem. They allowed tens of millions of people to come in. Many of them were murderers. Many were drug dealers, drug addicts, people from mental institutions. They allowed these people to violate our country, to come into our country. And that's what we're talking about. So if you remember, we had a horrible border, the worst border we've ever had, ever in history. People were flowing through by, we think, 25 million people, not to mention drugs and everything else. And that border is absolutely closed. Prices are coming down. The border is really strong. You know, if you remember, I probably got elected more than anything else on the border. We had a border that was open with 25 million people coming through with an open border policy, which was insane. And that's the policy that caused the problems that we have. With all of that being said, other than, I would say, just to put it accurately, Minnesota, and in particular Minneapolis, because it's not all of Minnesota. Every city that we've gone to has been, like, literally crime has gone down 50, 60, 70, 80. In Washington, it's gone down, there's practically no crime. You know, Washington is a great example, but you take a look at other cities, Memphis, Tennessee, the crime is down 78%. And you know where else it's down? It's down in Minnesota, it's down in Minneapolis, and it's down very much because of the fact that we're there. So we can't lose sight of the fact that we have to take murderers and drug lords and people from mental institutions that were dumped into our country through open borders of the Democrats, of Biden, and we're doing a great job. The other thing is Tom Homan is there right now. He's with the governor and he's with the mayor. And I hear things are going very nicely.
How close are we to the deal of the talks in Abu Dhabi that Tariff put to this week of hell? If your meeting with President Budapest back in play.
We're looking at some very good things happening on Ukraine and Russia.
Mr. President,
very good things are happening on Ukraine and
Russia. Mr. President, where do we stand on Gaza, Mr. President?
Everything is going very well. As you know, we got the last hostage down the body of the hostage. And a lot of people thought that was impossible. So we got all of the hostages back, both living and dead. And I can tell you, you have parents that really appreciate it.
What about the Hezbollah?
That being said, you know, we can't have guns. We can't walk in with guns. We can't walk in with guns. We can't do that. But it's just a very unfortunate
Okay, President Trump there speaking to reporters before departing for Iowa. A little bit noisy, hard to hear. But next, more on the president's visit to Iowa. We have the White House saying he'll focus on the economy, affordability, and energy policy. The president will stop at a local business before addressing supporters at the Horizon Event Center in Clive, Iowa. That's a suburb of Des Moines. Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt says Trump plans to highlight economic priorities and achievements from his first year back in office. And Chief of Staff Susie Wiles says energy policy will also play a key focus. The visit comes as protests are planned near the venue, with law enforcement preparing designated free speech zones. Trump last visited Iowa in July of last year, launching the America 250 celebration ahead of the nation's 250th anniversary. And President Trump signed an executive order aimed at helping Los Angeles residents rebuild homes destroyed by wildfires last year. The fires damaged much of the Pacific Palisades and Eaton Canyon areas, but rebuilding so far has been slow. The executive order aims to speed up the process of receiving permits for construction. According to the Trump administration, less than 15% of all homes destroyed by the fires have received construction permits. Trump blames local leadership in California for the slow process. The president told the New York Post that he now wants EPA Administrator Lee Zeldin to execute the order and bypass the local permitting red tape. Meanwhile, Alex Vindman is entering the race for the U.S. Senate in Florida. The Army veteran testified against President Trump during his first impeachment. He announced he's running as a Democrat in a special election to fill the seat vacated by former Senator Marco Rubio. Vindman served on the National Security Council in 2019. He raised concerns at the time about a phone call Trump had with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, testimony that helped trigger impeachment proceedings. Trump was later acquitted by the Senate. If he wins the Democratic nomination, Vindman will face Republican Senator Ashley Moody, a former Florida Attorney General appointed to the seat. The winner will serve the remaining 2 years of Rubio's term. Vindman is now the most prominent Democrat in the race as the party looks to compete in a state that has shifted solidly Republican in recent years. And the National Transportation Safety Board is holding a public hearing today, nearly a year after an Army helicopter collided with a passenger jet near Washington, D.C. The board's chairwoman said the agency had made significant progress in its investigation.
We asked the hard, uncomfortable questions that ruffled feathers, and we got to the truth. Our work, however, doesn't end today, as Member Inman stated, with the issuance of a final report. This is just the first step. We must, it is our duty to relentlessly, vigorously pursue safety change, which means we must do everything in our power, even ruffle feathers, to get our recommendations implemented, or this will happen again.
The NTSB has uncovered several factors that contributed to the crash. The agency pointed to the helicopter route past Ronald Reagan National Airport and warnings that the FAA had ignored for years. The board also determined that the Black Hawk had been flying 78 feet higher than it should have been. The NTSB added that the Army helicopter had turned off a key system that would have broadcast its location more clearly. In addition, the board's lead investigator said that an air traffic controller was handling 6 airplanes and 5 helicopters at the time. The Midair collision on January 29, 2025, killed all 67 people aboard both aircraft. The incident marked the deadliest plane crash in the U.S. since 2001. And Big Tech is heading to court facing claims that social media platforms are harming children's mental health. The companies behind the Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube will stand trial this week in Los Angeles over accusations their platforms deliberately create addiction in children. The trial could become a turning point for thousands of similar lawsuits nationwide. At the center of the case is a 19-year-old who says social media addiction from an early age exacerbated her depression and suicidal thoughts. Her lawyers say these companies deliberately embedded an array of design features aimed at maximizing youth engagement to drive advertising revenue. The companies dispute the claims that their products deliberately harm children. They've cited a number of safeguards added over the years and are arguing that they are not liable for content posted on their sites by third parties. Texas is taking new steps to protect its citizens from the Chinese Communist Party and other hostile foreign actors. The Lone Star State is expanding its list of technologies prohibited for use by state employees. Texas Governor Greg Abbott said, quote, "Rogue actors across the globe who wish harm on Texans should not be allowed to infiltrate our state's networks and devices." Abbott added shopping platforms Shein and Temu and the business-to-business marketplace Alibaba, as well as several more technologies to the Texas blacklist. The governor established the Texas Cyber Command in June 2025 with the signing of a state House bill and a $135 million investment. Abbott accused what he called hostile adversaries of harvesting user data through AI and other applications, putting Texans at extreme risk. The Internal Revenue Service announced the opening of the 2026 tax filing season yesterday. The White House said in a statement that millions of Americans are set to receive significantly larger tax refunds this year. The Treasury Department estimates that they'll average $1,000 more per household. That's because many filers didn't adjust their withholdings when recent income tax breaks began. A new law boosts the individual standard deduction by $750 and twice that for married couples. It also expands state and local tax deductions and gives a new break to some seniors. Coming up, India and the European Union reach a historic free trade agreement. European Union Chief Ursula von der Leyen describes the accord as the mother of all deals, which could affect 2 million people. And Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky honors Holocaust victims in Kyiv for International Holocaust Remembrance Day. And in the UK, British Prime Minister Keir Starmer welcomed a 95-year-old Holocaust survivor to a cabinet meeting at 10 Downing Street. Those stories and more after this. I'm Stephanie Cox, and this is World Watch. South Korea is urging the Trump administration to hold off on new tariffs. President Trump announced yesterday the United States would be increasing tariffs on South Korea to a new rate of 25%. Trump has threatened tariffs on autos and other imports, blaming a delay in enacting a trade deal that was agreed to last year. And South Korea's Democratic Party said 5 bills that would invest in the U.S. are now pending committee review. But the party is pushing to accelerate the process, but it did not give a timeline for a parliamentary vote. Next, India and the European Union have reached a free trade agreement. The deal is aimed at strengthening economic and strategic ties. The Indian Prime Minister said the deal will create major opportunities for people in India and Europe. He said it covers 25% of global GDP. It also represents 1/3 of global trade. The agreement links more than 2 billion people following nearly a decade of negotiations. The deal is expected to take effect early next year. It still requires approval by the European Parliament and EU member states.
Prime Minister, distinguished friend, we did it. We delivered the mother of all deals. We are creating a market of 2 billion people. And this is the tale of 2 giants, the world's 2nd and 4th largest economies. 2 giants who choose partnership in a true win-win fashion.
Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent was on ABC News yesterday talking about Europe's trade ties with India. Bessent said the U.S. has imposed 25% tariffs on India, which is linked to India's purchase of Russian oil. He said Russian oil is shipped to India. India refines the oil, and Europe then buys the refined products. Bessent argued that this process helps finance the war in Ukraine. He said Europe is effectively financing the conflict against itself. And France is moving toward banning teens under 15 from social media. The country's National Assembly backed the social media ban yesterday amid growing concerns over online bullying and mental health risks. The bill now goes to the Senate before a final vote in the lower house there. President Emmanuel Macron is urging France to follow in the footsteps of Australia, whose ban on social media for kids under 16 went into effect in December. Macron points to social media as a factor for violence among young people and says he wants the ban in place in time for the start of the next academic year in September. And survivors of Auschwitz are commemorating the 81st anniversary of their liberation. They visited a memorial site at the former concentration camp today. The former prisoners laid flowers and wreaths at the execution wall, also known as the Wall of Death. where the German forces shot and killed thousands of people. Later in the day, Poland's president will join survivors for a remembrance ceremony. The Nazis killed about 6 million European Jews and millions of others during World War II. The Auschwitz camp was liberated on January 27, 1945. Meanwhile, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky honored Holocaust victims today in Kyiv for International Holocaust Remembrance Day. Zelensky placed a candle at a memorial service as the capital faces rolling power outages. Senior officials attended the ceremony, listening as prayers were read at the site. In the UK, Prime Minister Keir Starmer welcomed a 95-year-old Holocaust survivor to a cabinet meeting at 10 Downing Street. The survivor addressed government officials and warned about the dangers of rising anti-Semitism around the world. And the White House also issued a presidential message to honor International Holocaust Remembrance Day. The message from President Trump called the Holocaust one of the darkest periods in human history and an indelible stain on humanity. It added that the United States pledges to fight anti-Semitism and that the administration commits to protecting religious freedom and human dignity. A Chinese spying operation has been hacking the mobile phones of senior London officials for years. That's according to a report by The Telegraph. According to the outlet's report yesterday, the hacking exposed officials' communications with Beijing between 2021 and 2024. The Telegraph cites intelligence sources in the U.S. Some of the officials targeted include the closest aides to former Prime Minister Boris Johnson, Liz Truss, and Rishi Sunak between 2021 and 2024. It's unclear whether the breach included the mobile phones of the prime ministers themselves. However, the Chinese spying operation, known as Salt Typhoon, is expected to be ongoing, raising the possibility that the current Prime Minister, Keir Starmer, may also have been exposed. Cuban President Miguel Diaz-Canel defended his country's military preparedness exercises on Saturday as a deterrent against potential aggression from the United States. Joining us to talk about it is John Deaton, a U.S. Marine veteran and former federal prosecutor. Great to have you with us, John. How much of an impact do you think Cuba's actions will have on its relationship with the U.S. amid the current tensions?
Well, I think President Trump has made it clear, and thank you for having me, that now is the time to make a deal with the United States. And if you follow President Trump, you know that he is a deal maker. He likes making deals, and he's really intent on foreign policy. And so, there's been this narrative, is Cuba ready to fall? It's been a narrative through the decades, but they survived the fall of the Soviet Union and decades of sanctions of the United States. But they are facing two things, an internal crisis and an external. The internal is migration, millions and millions. They went from 11 million to 2 million, from 11 million to 9 million in population in the last 2 years. And Venezuela was their lifeline, and Maduro has been taken away. And so it's kind of ripe for them to make a deal.
Yes, so you point here to President Trump earlier this month urging Cuba to make that deal regarding the oil and money that it has been sending to Venezuela. And the President Trump saying otherwise it will, of course, face consequences. In terms of the consequences that the communist leader may be fearing or anticipating, what do you think is on the table? What's possible?
Well, I think he's got to be very concerned. Listen, no matter what you think about the Venezuela operation and the capture of Maduro, regardless of your political posture on that particular thing, it was an absolute legendary thing that our U.S. military did. They went into one of the most safeguarded compounds in South America, killed hundreds and hundreds of guards without one American casualty, and took the president of the company, well, albeit an illegitimate president, out in his pajamas at night and brought him back to the United States. A flawless, legendary operation that's got to put the president of Cuba and the leader there on notice that he might want to make a deal, because he could do all the military operations he wants. He's not going to be able to deal with the U.S. military if we decide to go.
Yeah, so with these kind of internal and external threats that you've outlined, what is the worst case scenario that may be possible here?
Well, the worst case scenario is that their lifeline, as far as Venezuela, that economically has been cut off. And right now, you see the president trying to of Cuba trying to reach out to China and Russia to see if he can reestablish a lifeline. But if the state fails, they're seeing 20 and 22 hours a day of power outage. If the infrastructure fails, then you give rise to someone who's more moderate in the military saying, you know what, maybe we should make a deal. And then you could see them overthrowing the current president.
Right. What kind of signals would you be looking for to see whether that is transpiring?
It really comes down to whether or not they can function and say, listen, if you can't keep the lights on, and they've been struggling, we're talking about in the major cities having power outages for most of the day. If the state can't function, if the people are losing power, if the infrastructure is crumbling, and you couple that with even more mass migration out of Cuba and a brain drain leaving, then you're going to see the military inside, which is entrenched for 60 years, saying, listen, for our own survival, let's cut a deal. Let's go to the table to the Trump administration and see if we can make a new age deal for our people.
And so that was a bit of a potential look ahead. What pressure, economic or political or otherwise, is the U.S. currently applying to Cuba?
Well, right now, I think it's more of an external. The United States is reaching out and trying to cut off any other countries doing business with China, doing business with Cuba, because they've lost their lifeline with Venezuela. And if they're able to do that, if they're able to completely choke out economically the government in Cuba, and they don't have someone like China coming to their rescue, then in fact, that's probably the best situation the United States could do. I don't think the United States is going to invade Cuba. It's more about causing such pressure internally that people within the government itself who are more moderate, who are willing to strike a deal, will take this opportunity and do something right for the people of Cuba.
Do you think that this particular approach of the U.S. has changed much under this Trump administration?
Well, yeah, I think that the main thing is that when you look at Cuba's economic survival, we're talking about 75% are the estimates of coming from the Maduro regime and coming out of Venezuela. I mean, you know, you could take a 25% hit, but taking a 75% hit economically, that predominantly is what has done it. And Trump has signaled to them, listen, if you want to come to the table, come now, because it's only going to get worse for you. And I think that you maybe even see the United States engage in a little bit of cyber warfare to keep the infrastructure maxed and stressed out, to cause that internal pressure. Because the best news for the United States is obviously not externally causing regime change, but putting on such pressures, both economically and infrastructure-wise, that they have a sort of a overthrow within their own government.
Now, the Chinese Communist Party has reportedly come out pledging its support and assistance to Cuba amid these tensions. How do you see that in the context of the CCP's current instability, weak economy, and internal unrest right now?
Yeah, I would be very surprised if President Trump doesn't get on the phone to President Xi of China and say, listen, you know, we're in the middle of our own potential trade warfare where we sort of seem to manage through it. But if you go to the aid of Cuba, then you're looking at more possible tariffs put on Chinese products and see if they can cut that lifeline. If they can cut off the lifeline of China or Russia coming to Cuba's aid, then I think we're really looking at a true different outcome in Cuba than we've had. That this 2026 could be the very different year where Cuba changes more for the positive for the people. But they're certainly looking for a lifeline. China's extending it. The question is, will President Trump be able to successfully interfere with cutting that off?
All right, great to hear your insights today. Thank you so much. John Deaton, also running for the U.S. Senate in Massachusetts. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
And Super Bowl 60 is around the corner. This year it returns to Silicon Valley after 10 years. Up ahead, we'll look at local leaders preparing to get football fans to the game safely and smoothly. Plus, one of America's founding fathers, he spent nearly 16 years in London. Now his former home is marking 250 years of American history. We'll have the details on that after this break. Welcome back. Super Bowl 60 is less than 2 weeks away. The big game is being held in the San Francisco Bay Area. NTD's David Lamb has more on how Silicon Valley is preparing.
Silicon Valley is preparing its transportation and safety measures to ensure a successful Super Bowl 60 on Sunday, February 8th. It's being held in Santa Clara at the Levi Stadium. Carolyn Gonot, CEO of the local transit system, says they started planning 2 years ago.
In less than 3 weeks, VTA will be moving record-breaking crowds to one of the biggest sporting events on the planet, Super Bowl 60, right here at Levi Stadium. Today is about excitement, preparation, and confidence because VTA is ready.
The local transit system expects to carry 25,000 people to and from the stadium and has made improvements such as eliminating slow zones. San Francisco Mayor Daniel Lurie says the California Highway Patrol will be deployed to help local law enforcement during the days leading up to the big game.
All of our teams have been preparing for months. We are ready, we are coordinated, and we are confident that we will provide a safe, welcoming experience for our residents and our visitors.
Super Bowl 50 was held in Silicon Valley 10 years ago. From expanded transportation and increased safety and security measures, local leaders are revamping for the influx of football fans to watch the game between the Seattle Seahawks and New England Patriots. David Lamb, NTD News, California.
And while the American colonies were still ruled under the British Crown, founding father Benjamin Franklin spent nearly 16 years living in London. Today, his former home there is helping to mark 250 years since American independence. NTD's Andrew Thomas has the details on the only surviving Franklin residence in the world.
This building on London's Craven Street used to be home to one of American history's most iconic figures. Benjamin Franklin lived here between 1757 and 1775 and became an important figure in Britain's political, scientific, and social life. Head of Education at the Benjamin Franklin House, Henry Wilkinson, explains.
Benjamin Franklin arrives in London as a celebrity. He's well known among scientific circles, which means he has a way into lots of dinner parties, social clubs, societies. He makes friends with a lot of very influential figures in the 18th century during this time, not just in London, but around the UK as well.
Built as a lodging house, the home still features original fireplaces, staircases, and floorboards. Replicas of Franklin's bifocal glasses are also on display. By the early 1770s, relations between Britain and the American colonies had grown tense. Franklin's status in London began to deteriorate.
Franklin is chased out of London in 1775. He's accused of being a spy. And by the time he gets back to America, Lexington and Concord happen pretty much a week later, and the Revolutionary War begins.
Franklin didn't fight in the war, but still retained significant influence on how it was fought. He would help to draft the Declaration of Independence and secure French support for the revolution. Later, he would become a signatory to the United States Constitution.
He's too old to be on the front line of the American Revolution. He's more of an advisor. He gives the go-ahead, seal of approval. If Franklin is in the room, then what you're discussing is worth listening to, essentially. And if he gets up and leaves, you need to rethink what you're talking about.
The house opened to the public in 2006 after extensive restoration. While it contains interesting artifacts, Deputy Director Michael Hall says the focus is on the home.
We're a non-collecting museum, so we don't have a big collection. We have a few small objects, but the house itself is the main object that we use to interpret Franklin's time here. Because we don't know what the furniture was that was here, we only have a few references to small pieces.
Upstairs, past the original staircase, a decorative glass instrument is on display. As the bowls spin, the player touches the glass with dampened fingers to produce different notes.
The glass harmonica is invented by Franklin while he lives in the house, and it's something that he's really proud of. He enjoys showing it off to people, and it's partly because it is both a musical instrument, but sort of an Enlightenment musical instrument, so it's based on scientific theories.
As the United States celebrates 250 years since independence, Franklin's house is preparing a new digital app and digital exhibition, due to be unveiled in February. Andrew Thomas, NTD News.
And that's all we have time for this hour, but if you have any feedback on the show or have something you'd like to see us cover, send us an email at news.today@ntd.com. We would love to hear from you, and we'll cover more news right after this break.